Jake Morrison sat in the corner of the big meeting room and watched 12 different alien species argue about war. The room was huge and filled with strange creatures that looked nothing like humans. Some had forearms, others looked like walking crystals, and a few resembled giant insects with clicking sounds coming from their mouths. The meeting was happening on Nexus Prime, a massive space station that served as the headquarters for the Galactic Defense Council. Jake was the only human in the room, and nobody seemed to care much about what he thought. He had been sitting there for 3 hours, listening to the aliens talk about their plans to fight an enemy called the Void Hunters. Admiral Kethvar was a Zelrani, which meant he looked like a tall blue creature with 4 arms and glowing yellow eyes. He stood at the center of the room, waving all 4 arms as he spoke about his fleet. "Our energy shields have never been broken," he said in a voice that sounded like thunder. "We have 3,000 ships with the strongest defenses in the galaxy. These Void Hunters will crash against our shields like waves against a mountain." The other aliens nodded and made various sounds of agreement. A Quarith delegate, who looked like a walking piece of purple crystal, began to make musical sounds that the translator turned into words. "Our phase shift technology allows us to move between dimensions. We can attack from spaces that do not exist in normal reality. Our 2,000 ships will appear and disappear like ghosts, striking where the enemy cannot defend." Queen Speaker Vrex was the representative of the insect-like race. She clicked her mandibles together and spoke in a buzzing voice. "My children are bred for war. Each bioship contains 1,000 warriors ready to die for victory. Our 1,500 vessels will swarm the enemy like angry bees protecting their hive." Jake said nothing. He just watched and listened, taking notes in his mind about everything he heard. The aliens kept talking about their amazing technology and their perfect battle plans. They showed holographic displays of their fleets and weapons. Every species seemed to think they had the best way to fight. The meeting had been going on for days, and Jake had barely spoken 10 words the entire time. Whenever someone asked him about Earth's contribution to the defense, he would just shake his head and say that his people were ready to do their part. This seemed to amuse the aliens, who would exchange looks and make sounds that Jake assumed were their version of laughter. Earth had only joined the Galactic Defense Council 2 years ago. Humans were the newest members, and their technology looked very basic compared to what the other species had developed over thousands of years. The human fleet consisted of only 50 ships, which seemed tiny when compared to the thousands that each major alien race was bringing to the fight. The Void Hunters were approaching fast. They had been destroying colonies and space stations across 3 different sectors of the galaxy. Nobody knew where they came from or what they wanted, but they were clearly hostile. Their ships were unlike anything anyone had seen before, and they seemed to have weapons that could destroy entire planets. Jake had read all the reports about the Void Hunter attacks. The enemy always moved in perfect formation and never made mistakes. They would arrive at a target, destroy everything in sight, and then disappear before any help could arrive. No one had ever successfully fought them and lived to tell about. The aliens in the meeting room were confident that this time would be different. They had managed to gather the largest fleet in galactic history. Nearly 10,000 ships from 12 different species would meet the Void Hunters at a place called the Kepler Defense Line. It was a strategic location where space lanes came together, making it impossible for the enemy to go around their defensive position. "What about the humans?" asked a delegate from the Korthax Republic. The Korthax looked like lizards that walked on 2 legs and had scales that changed color when they spoke. "What is their battle plan?" All eyes in the room turned to Jake. He looked up from his quiet corner and met their gaze calmly. "Captain Lisa Park has her orders," he said simply. "We will do our part when the time comes." The aliens seemed to find this answer amusing. Admiral Kethvar made a sound that might have been laughter. With 50 ships against an enemy that destroys worlds, perhaps the humans plan to surrender quickly and save us the trouble of protecting them. More sounds of alien amusement filled the room. Jake did not react to their comments. He simply returned to his silent observation, watching and listening as the aliens continued to discuss their grand strategies and superior technology. The meeting would continue for several more hours, but Jake had already heard everything he needed to know. The aliens were powerful, confident, and completely convinced that their way of fighting was the only way that mattered. They had no idea that their greatest strength might also be their greatest weakness. As the sun set through the artificial windows of Nexus Prime, Jake remained in his corner, saying nothing while the aliens planned their perfect war. 3 days after the big meeting, the long-range sensors on Nexus Prime began screaming warnings. The Void Hunter fleet had been detected moving toward the Kepler defense line, and the numbers made everyone stop talking. Over 8,000 enemy ships were approaching in perfect formation, their dark hulls barely visible against the stars. Jake stood in the command center watching the tactical displays show the approaching threat. The screens were filled with red dots representing enemy vessels, each one moving with mechanical precision. The fleet looked like a giant arrow pointed directly at the heart of galactic civilization. Admiral Kethvar was commanding the largest defensive force from his flagship, a massive dreadnought called the Eternal Storm. His 3,000 Zelrani ships formed the center of the defensive line, their blue hulls gleaming with the energy shields that had never been broken in battle. The Admiral's voice boomed across the communication channels as he coordinated his fleet movements. All Zelrani vessels, maintain formation Delta 7, power shields to maximum capacity. Today we show these invaders what happens when they threaten our people. The pride in his voice was clear, and his officers responded with enthusiastic battle cries that sounded like thunder rolling across the stars. The Quarith had positioned their 2,000 phase ships in a complex pattern that looked random but was actually based on mathematical formulas that humans had never fully understood. Their crystalline vessels began to shimmer and fade as they prepared to shift between dimensions. The musical sounds of their communication created an eerie harmony that seemed to make space itself vibrate. Commander Zelith, the Quarith fleet leader, spoke in tones that the translators turned into poetry. We dance between the spaces that exist and those that do not. Our enemies will find only emptiness where they expect to find targets. We are the song that cannot be silenced, the light that cannot be dimmed. The Vrex bioships were perhaps the most frightening sight on the battlefield. 1,500 living vessels that had been grown rather than built, each one looking like a massive insect with weapons instead of legs. Queenspeaker Vrex commanded them from her hive ship, a creature so large it could have swallowed a human, destroyer without noticing. "My children hunger for battle," she announced, her clicking voice filled with anticipation. "They smell the fear of our enemies across the void. Soon they will feast on the metal and energy of those who dare threaten the hive." The swarm remembers every slight, every attack, every drop of spilled blood. Other alien species added their own vessels to the defensive wall. The Korthax brought their stealth ships that could become invisible. The Morvok contributed their planet-killer cannons. The Synthons sent their robot fleets that felt no fear and never retreated. Nearly 10,000 ships from 12 different civilizations created the largest military force in galactic history. At the far edge of the formation, almost forgotten by the other fleets, 50 human ships took their assigned positions. The UES Defiant, commanded by Captain Lisa Park, served as the flagship for Earth's small contribution. The human vessels looked tiny and primitive compared to the massive alien dreadnoughts and bioships around them. Captain Park was a veteran of Earth's colonial wars, a woman who had learned to fight in the asteroid belts and outer system conflicts that had shaped humanity's expansion into space. Her ship was old but well-maintained, with weapons and armor that seemed almost crude compared to alien technology. "All human vessels, check your positions and prepare for combat," she broadcast on the human frequency. "Remember what we discussed. Wait for the signal and follow the plan exactly as we practiced. No heroics, no improvisation until I give the word." The other alien commanders barely noticed the human transmissions. To them, 50 ships were not worth considering when facing an enemy of 8,000 vessels. Some had suggested that the humans should stay behind and guard the supply lines, but Jake had insisted that Earth's ships take their place in the battle line. Jake remained on Nexus Prime, watching the tactical displays from the main command center. The alien officers around him were busy coordinating their fleets and discussing their battle plans. Nobody asked for his opinion or seemed interested in what the humans might be planning. The Void Hunter fleet continued its approach with the same mechanical precision that had destroyed dozens of colonies. Their ships were dark and angular, with no visible windows or external features that might indicate crew quarters. They moved like a school of metal fish, each vessel maintaining perfect distance from its neighbors. "Look at their formation," said Admiral Kethvar as he studied the enemy approach. "They move like machines without creativity or adaptability. We will use their predictability against them. Our combined tactics will overwhelm their rigid thinking." The Quarith agreed, their musical voices creating harmonies of confidence. "Their patterns are mathematical but simple. We have calculated 17 different ways to disrupt their formations. They will find themselves dancing to our song instead of their own." Queen Speaker Vrex clicked her approval. "Machines cannot match the fury of living creatures. My children will show them the difference between cold calculation and hot blood. The swarm adapts, the swarm overcomes, the swarm devours." Jake listened to all the confident predictions and battle plans. The aliens were certain that their superior numbers, advanced technology, and centuries of military experience would be enough to defeat the mysterious invaders. They had fought wars against each other for thousands of years and had developed tactics and strategies that had been tested in countless battles. As the enemy fleet drew closer, Jake finally spoke into his communicator. "Captain Park, are you ready?" "Ready as we'll ever be, Commander," came the reply. "All ships are in position and waiting for your signal. The crew knows what to do." "Good," Jake said quietly. "Remember, timing is everything. Wait for my command and then execute exactly as we planned." The alien officers in the command center barely noticed the brief human exchange. They were too busy preparing for what they believed would be a glorious victory against an enemy that had never faced the combined might of galactic civilization. None of them realized that everything they thought they knew about warfare was about to become useless. The Void Hunter fleet stopped exactly 1 million kilometers from the Kepler defense line and began broadcasting on every frequency known to galactic science. The message was simple, but sent chills through every alien in the combined fleet. It came in mathematical language that automatically translated across all species, making the meaning clear to everyone who heard it. "Surrender all advanced technology and biological specimens for analysis and preservation. Resistance will result in complete annihilation. You have 1 standard hour to comply with this directive. This is your only warning." Jake watched the reaction in the command center of Nexus Prime as the message repeated every 60 seconds. The alien officers were shocked at first, then angry, then determined to show these invaders what happened when they threatened civilized space. Admiral Kethvar was the first to respond, his forearms gesturing dramatically as he spoke. "Attention, unknown vessels. This is Admiral Kethvar of the Galactic Defense Council. You are facing the combined might of 12 star nations and nearly 10,000 warships. We do not surrender to anyone, especially to cowards who hide behind threats. If you want our technology, come and take it." The Zelrani Admiral's response was broadcast on all frequencies so the enemy could hear it clearly. His officers cheered, and the other alien fleets added their own messages of defiance. The Quarith sang their mathematical war songs, while the Frex clicked their mandibles in anticipation of battle. Commander Zilith of the Quarith added his own musical response. "We are the harmony of free peoples, the song that has echoed across the galaxy for 10,000 years. Your silence cannot drown out our music. Your darkness cannot dim our light. We choose to dance rather than kneel." Queen Speaker Vrex was more direct in her communication. "The swarm does not bow to parasites. Come closer, metal creatures, and learn what happens when you threaten the children of the hive. We will pick your bones clean and use your ships to build new nests." The other species added their own declarations of war. The Korthax promised to hunt the invaders through every shadow. The Morvok swore to crack their ships like nuts. The Synthons calculated the probability of enemy survival and found it to be 0.001%. Jake listened to all the brave words and watched the tactical display as the Void Hunter fleet began to move again. What troubled him was not their weapons or their numbers, but the way they had positioned themselves. The enemy formation was too perfect too precise, as if they knew exactly where every Allied ship would be before the battle even started. "Captain Park," he said quietly into his communicator. "Are you seeing what I'm seeing?" "Yes, sir," came the reply from the UES Defiant. "Their formation suggests they know our standard battle tactics. They're positioned to counter classical fleet movements and defensive patterns. It's like they've studied our textbooks." Jake nodded even though she could not see him. "Keep your ships in loose formation and wait for my signal. Do not engage until I give the order, no matter what happens to the other fleets." The alien commanders, in the control room, were busy finalizing their battle plans. They had decades of experience fighting wars, and their strategies had been proven successful countless times. The Zelrani would form the heavy assault line, using their powerful shields to absorb enemy fire, while their weapons punched holes in the invader formations. The Quarith would phase shift around the battlefield, appearing behind enemy lines to strike at weak points before disappearing again. Their ability to move between dimensions made them nearly impossible to target effectively, and they could coordinate attacks from multiple realities at the same time. The Vrex bioships would swarm the enemy vessels like angry insects, using their living hulls to absorb damage while their warrior crews boarded enemy ships. Once the Virex got close enough to touch an enemy vessel, the battle was usually over within minutes. The other species had their own specialized roles. The Korthax would use stealth to eliminate enemy commanders. The Morvok would target the largest enemy ships with their planet-killer weapons. The Synthons would coordinate perfect formations that never broke under pressure. It was a battle plan that had worked for thousands of years against every enemy the galaxy had ever faced. The aliens were confident that their combined experience and superior technology would overwhelm these mysterious invaders, no matter how many ships they brought to the fight. Jake was not so confident. He had spent the last 3 days studying every report about Void Hunter attacks, and something was bothering him about their tactics. The enemy always seemed to know exactly how their opponents would fight. They countered every strategy perfectly, as if they had access to the tactical databases of every species they attacked. "Sir," said a Korthax intelligence officer, "we have completed our analysis of the enemy fleet composition. Their ships appear to be using some form of adaptive armor that changes configuration based on incoming weapon types. They also seem to have countermeasures for dimensional manipulation and biological warfare." Jake's suspicions were confirmed. The Void Hunters had come prepared for everything the Allied fleet could throw at them. They knew about Zelrani shields, Quarith phase shifting, and Vrex swarm tactics. They had studied their enemies and built countermeasures for every known form of galactic warfare. "How long until they reach weapons range?" asked Admiral Kethvar. "Approximately 15 minutes at their current speed," replied the tactical officer. "All fleets report ready for battle. Shields are at maximum power. Weapons are charged and boarding parties are standing by." The Void Hunter fleet continued its perfect approach, each ship maintaining exact distance from its neighbors. There was something mechanical and emotionless about their movement that made Jake think of insects or machines rather than living creatures. They showed no fear, no hesitation, no doubt about the outcome of the coming battle. "All vessels, prepare for combat," Admiral Kethvar announced. "Today we fight not just for our own peoples, but for the freedom of every living being in the galaxy. These invaders will learn that courage and determination can overcome any technological advantage." Jake watched the tactical display as thousands of ships prepared for the largest space battle in galactic history. The aliens were brave and their technology was impressive, but he could see the trap that was about to close around them. The Void Hunters had planned this battle down to the smallest detail, and they were about to spring a trap that had taken decades to prepare. "Captain Park," he said quietly, "execute Protocol 7 when I give the signal. Not before, no matter what happens." "Understood, Commander," came the reply. "We'll be ready." The first shots of the battle erupted across space like deadly fireworks. Admiral Kethvar opened fire with his 3,000 Zelrani dreadnoughts, their massive energy cannons creating brilliant blue streams of destruction that should have vaporized anything they touched. The shots flew true toward the Void Hunter fleet, and for a moment it looked like the invaders would be destroyed in the opening seconds. Then something impossible happened. The Void Hunter ships seemed to absorb the energy blasts without taking any damage. Their hulls shifted and changed color as the Zelrani weapons struck them, and the deadly energy that should have melted metal simply disappeared into their adaptive armor. "Impossible!" Admiral Keithvar roared over the communication channels. "Nothing can withstand a full salvo from Zelrani battle cannons. Increase power to maximum and fire again." The second wave of blue energy struck the enemy fleet with even more force than the first. This time, the Void Hunter ships did not even bother to change color. They simply continued their perfect formation, as if the most powerful weapons in Zelrani space were nothing more than gentle rain. Commander Zelith ordered the Quarith phase ships to begin their dimensional attacks. 2,000 crystalline vessels shimmered and faded from normal space, preparing to emerge behind enemy lines where their musical weapons could tear holes in reality itself. The Quarith had never met an enemy that could defend against attacks from multiple dimensions. The phase shift completed, and the Quarith ships materialized behind the Void Hunter fleet, their crystal hulls singing with harmonious destruction. The mathematical songs of war began to play, creating weapons made of pure sound and vibration that could shatter any known material. The Void Hunters were waiting for them. As soon as the Quarith ships appeared, the enemy vessels turned to face them with weapons that created zones of complete silence in space. The Quarith songs died in the void, their harmonic weapons neutralized by technology that seemed specifically designed to counter their abilities. "How did they know we were coming?" Commander Zelith sang in shocked disharmony. "No one can predict a phase shift calculation. We emerge from spaces that do not exist until we create them." Queen Speaker Vrex watched her Quarith allies struggle and decided to launch her own attack. The 1,500 Vrex bioships broke formation and swarmed toward the enemy fleet like angry hornets protecting their nest. The living vessels pulsed with biological weapons that could eat through any armor, while their warrior crews prepared to board and capture enemy ships. The Void Hunters had an answer for this attack too. Their ships released clouds of metallic particles that seemed harmless until they touched the Vrex bioships. The particles immediately began consuming the living hulls, eating through biological armor faster than the ships could heal themselves. Within minutes, dozens of bioships were dissolving into space dust. "My children are dying," Queen Speaker Vrex clicked in horror. "The metal plague consumes their flesh. Retreat, my beautiful ones. Retreat before the poison kills you all." Jake watched from Nexus Prime as the battle turned into a massacre. The Void Hunters seemed to have perfect counters for every alien weapon and tactic. Korthak's stealth ships were detected and destroyed before they could fire a shot. Morvok planet killers found their weapons turned back on themselves. Synth and robot fleets had their programming overridden and turned against their own allies. Within the first hour of battle, the combined Galactic fleet had lost over 1,000 ships without inflicting a single confirmed kill on the enemy. The Void Hunters moved through the chaos with mechanical precision, their formations never breaking despite the desperate attacks from 12 different species. "All fleets reform defensive positions," Admiral Keithvar ordered, his voice strained with disbelief. "Concentrate fire on single targets. They cannot have countermeasures for everything if we overwhelm them with focused attacks." The surviving alien ships tried to follow his orders, but the Void Hunters seemed to anticipate every move. When the Zelrani concentrated their fire, the enemy ships spread out to minimize damage. When the Quarith tried new phase shift patterns, the invaders were already waiting with their silence weapons ready. The Vrex attempted to use their remaining bioships as suicide bombers, but the enemy's metallic plague consumed them before they could reach their targets. The other species tried increasingly desperate tactics, but nothing worked against an enemy that seemed to know their every thought before they had it. "Commander Morrison," Admiral Keithvar called out on the command frequency. "We need the human fleet to assist immediately. We are taking heavy casualties and require all available support." Jake looked at the tactical display where the 50 human ships remained in loose formation at the edge of the battle. Captain Park's vessels had not fired a single shot or moved from their assigned positions. To the desperate alien commanders, It looked like the humans were too frightened to join the fight. "Captain Park is waiting for the right moment," Jake replied calmly. "Human ships will engage when conditions are optimal for their capabilities." Optimal conditions? Admiral Kethvar's voice cracked with frustration. "We are being slaughtered. Out here. What conditions could be more optimal than helping your allies survive?" The Quarith joined their musical voices to the plea. "Commander Morrison, we beg you to send your ships into battle. Even 50 vessels might make the difference between victory and defeat. Do not let fear prevent you from acting." Queen Speaker. Frex added her clicking voice to the desperate requests. "The swarm calls to your small hive for aid. Every ship matters when the colony faces extinction. Join us in glorious battle or watch us die alone." Jake listened to the pleas from the alien commanders as their fleets continued to take devastating losses. The Void Hunters showed no mercy and no emotion, as they systematically destroyed ship after ship, with weapons perfectly designed to counter each species' strengths. "The human fleet will engage when I give the order," Jake said quietly into his communicator. "Captain Park, maintain current positions and wait for my signal. Do not break formation under any circumstances." On the tactical display, Jake could see that the battle was proceeding exactly as he had feared. The Void Hunters were not just winning. They were demonstrating complete knowledge of galactic military doctrine. Every tactic, every strategy, every technological advantage that the Allied fleets possessed had been studied and countered. The aliens were fighting a war that had been lost before it began, because they were fighting an enemy that knew everything about how they thought and how they fought. The Void Hunters had turned the galaxy's greatest strength, their thousands of years of military experience, into their greatest weakness. Jake knew that conventional tactics would never work against an enemy this prepared. The only hope was to do something that had never been done before, something so unprecedented that no database could contain information about it, something completely unpredictable. 2 hours into the battle, the combined galactic fleet had been reduced to less than half its original strength. Over 4,000 ships lay destroyed or disabled, their crews dead or dying in the cold vacuum of space. The Void Hunters continued their methodical destruction without showing any signs of damage or fatigue. Admiral Kethvar's flagship, the Eternal Storm, was heavily damaged and listing to one side. His 4 arms shook with rage and desperation as he watched his proud fleet being torn apart by an enemy that seemed to know their every move before they made it. The Zelrani shields that had never been broken in 1,000 years of warfare were useless against weapons that seemed specifically designed to penetrate them. Commander Zeleth of the Quarith was no longer singing. His crystalline ship had been forced back into normal space and was leaking atmosphere from multiple breaches. The mathematical harmony that had guided his people through countless battles had been replaced by the cold silence of the enemy's anti-dimensional weapons. Queen Speaker Vrex had lost over half her bioships to the metallic plague that consumed living tissue. Her remaining children huddled together in defensive formations, too afraid to attack an enemy that could kill them with airborne poison. The proud warrior race that had never retreated from any battle was facing the possibility of extinction. In the command center of Nexus Prime, the surviving alien officers turned to Jake with desperation in their eyes. Their confidence had been shattered along with their fleets, and they were willing to listen to anyone who might have an answer to their impossible situation. Jake finally stood up from his corner and walked to the center of the room. All conversation stopped as the aliens waited to hear what the quiet human had to say. His voice was calm and steady, showing none of the panic that filled the air around him. "Your species have been fighting wars for thousands of years," Jake said, looking at each alien commander in turn. "You have developed incredible technologies that can destroy planets and bend space itself to your will. You have created weapons that can kill from other dimensions and armor that can stop anything known to galactic science." Admiral Kethvar interrupted with frustration. "Yes, we have all of these things, but they are useless against this enemy. They have counters for everything we possess. How can we fight an opponent that knows our every weakness?" Jake nodded slowly. "That is exactly the problem. You have also developed patterns over those thousands of years. Every victory you have won, Every battle you have fought, every tactic you have used has been recorded and studied. The Void Hunters have been watching you for decades, learning how you think and how you fight. Commander Xylith's crystals chimed, with confused harmonics. Are you saying they have been spying on us? How could they observe our battles without being detected? They do not need spies, Jake replied. Your own databases contain everything they need to know. Every military academy in the galaxy teaches the same basic principles of space warfare. Every species follows logical patterns based on their technology and culture. You are predictable because you are experienced. Queen Speaker Vrex clicked her mandibles nervously. But experience is what makes us strong. Our ancestors learned through countless battles how to survive and win. Are you saying that knowledge is worthless? Jake's expression remained calm as he continued his explanation. Your knowledge is perfect for fighting enemies who follow the same rules you do. But the Void Hunters are not playing by those rules. They have studied every battle doctrine, every tactical manual, every strategic principle that your species have developed. He gestured toward the tactical display showing the ongoing massacre. Look at how they fight. They do not use formations that any military academy would recognize. They do not follow logical attack patterns. They do not try to minimize casualties or conserve resources. They are fighting a completely different kind of war. Admiral Kethvar's voice was bitter. With defeat, then we are doomed. If our experience and technology cannot save us, what hope do we have? Jake turned to look directly at the Zelrani admiral. Humanity has only been spacefaring for 2 centuries. We have only been part of this galaxy for 2 years. The Void Hunters have no data on us because we have never fought a major space battle before. The alien stared at him in confusion. Commander Xylith was the first to understand the implications. You are saying that human inexperience is an advantage? That your lack of knowledge makes you stronger than our accumulated wisdom? Not stronger, Jake corrected. Different. Human warfare does not follow the patterns that galactic military science considers normal. We learned to fight on a world where survival meant adapting constantly, where the biggest advantage was doing something your enemy did not expect. Queen Speaker Vrex leaned forward with interest. Your species has a different way of fighting? What makes human warfare so special? Jake's lips curved into a slight smile. We cheat. We break rules. We do things that make no tactical sense because sometimes the best strategy is to have no strategy at all. Humans have been proving that for thousands of years on our own world. The alien commanders exchanged glances, trying to understand what the human was telling them. Their military training told them that chaos was the enemy of victory, that discipline and planning were essential for success in battle. Earth's history is filled with battles where the smaller, weaker force defeated a larger, stronger enemy by doing something completely unexpected. Jake continued. We learned that when you cannot win by following the rules, you change the rules. Admiral. Kethvar shook his head in disbelief. You are talking about abandoning everything we know about warfare. That is not strategy. That is madness. Sometimes madness is the most logical choice, Jake replied. The Void Hunters have perfect counters for logical warfare. They have no programming to deal with actions that appear completely insane, but prove devastatingly effective. As if summoned by his words, Captain Park's voice crackled over the communications array. Nexus Prime, this is Defiant. All human vessels are in position and ready to execute, awaiting final confirmation to begin the operation. Jake nodded toward the communication console. Captain Park, you are authorized to proceed. Execute Protocol 7 immediately. The alien commanders watched in confusion as Jake gave the order that would either save their fleets or complete their destruction. None of them understood what Protocol 7 meant, but they were about to witness something that would change their understanding of warfare forever. What happened next defied every principle of space warfare that the galaxy had ever known. The 50 human ships suddenly broke their careful formation and scattered in what appeared to be complete panic. Some vessels accelerated directly toward the Void Hunter fleet, while others seemed to retreat in random directions. Several ships began spinning wildly while firing their weapons at empty space. The alien commanders in the Nexus Prime control room watched in horror as the human fleet appeared to fall apart under pressure. Admiral Kethvar made a sound of disgust as he saw human ships flying in circles and shooting at nothing. Commander Zelith's crystals rang with notes of disappointment at what looked like complete cowardice. They have lost their minds, Queen Speaker Vrex clicked sadly. The pressure of battle has broken their weak spirits. Now they flee like frightened insects from a disturbed nest. But Jake was watching the tactical display with satisfaction rather than concern. The seemingly random movements of the human ships were not random at all. Every erratic course change, every wild shot, every apparent act of cowardice was part of a plan that made no sense to anyone who understood normal space combat. The Void Hunters also seemed confused by the human behavior. For the first time since the battle began, their perfect formations hesitated. Their computers were trying to calculate human intentions based on galactic military databases that contained no relevant information about this type of chaotic fighting. Captain, Lisa Park's voice came through the communications clearly despite the apparent chaos around her ship. All vessels continue evasive pattern 7. Remember, you are not trying to hit anything yet. Just keep them guessing what we are doing. UE's Defiant was spinning end over end while firing its main guns in what looked like completely random directions. The shots missed everything and disappeared into empty space, making it appear that the human gunners had lost all accuracy under the stress of combat. But Jake could see what the aliens and the Void Hunters could not. The human weapons were not missing their targets. They were creating a complex web of ricochets off destroyed alien ship hulls and debris fields scattered throughout the battle zone. Each shot was carefully calculated to bounce off multiple surfaces before heading toward predetermined coordinates. The human ships that appeared to be retreating were actually placing quantum mines in patterns that made no tactical sense according to any known military doctrine. The mines were small and almost undetectable, but when activated together they would create gravitational distortions that could trap entire fleets in place. The vessels that were spinning wildly were using their rotation to create small gravitational eddies in space-time. Individually, these distortions were harmless, but when combined with the minefields and ricochet patterns, they would form a trap that no conventional military mind could have conceived. "Now, Captain Park," Jake said quietly into his communicator, "execute Phase 2. The human fleet suddenly stopped all of their apparently random movements and began working together in perfect coordination. The ricocheting weapons fire that had been bouncing through the debris field for the last 10 minutes suddenly converged on the Void Hunter fleet from dozens of different angles. The enemy ships found themselves under attack from directions that should have been impossible. Weapons fire was coming at them from behind destroyed hulks, from empty space where no human ships were visible, and from angles that violated the basic laws of physics as the aliens understood them. The quantum mines activated simultaneously, creating gravitational wells that caught the Void Hunter ships like flies in a spider web. The enemy vessels that had moved with perfect precision throughout the battle suddenly found themselves unable to maneuver, as space itself seemed to grab them and hold them in place. The spinning human ships had created gravitational eddies that disrupted the enemy's adaptive armor. The Void Hunter hulls that had absorbed every alien weapon without damage began to crack and buckle under stresses they had never been designed to handle. For the first time in the battle, Void Hunter ships began to explode. "Impossible, Admiral," Kethavar whispered, as he watched human weapons tear through enemy hulls that had shrugged off his most powerful cannons. "How are they penetrating armor that stopped our best shots?" Jake smiled as he watched the trap spring shut around the enemy fleet. "Because they designed that armor to stop conventional weapons fired in conventional ways. They never considered the possibility of weapons that bounced around the battlefield for 10 minutes before hitting their targets. The Void Hunter fleet tried to adapt to the human attack, but their computers had no programming to deal with warfare that appeared completely insane. Their perfect formations broke apart as ships tried to escape the gravitational traps, only to find themselves caught in even more complex webs of ricochet fire and spatial distortions. Captain Park's voice rang with triumph as her ships pressed their impossible attack. "All vessels continue pattern Omega. They cannot predict our movements because we are not following any recognizable tactical doctrine. Keep them confused and keep firing." The human ships danced through the battlefield. Like leaves in a hurricane, their movements so random and chaotic that the Void Hunter targeting systems could not lock onto them. Every time the enemy tried to focus fire on a human vessel, it would suddenly change direction in a way that made no logical sense. The surviving alien ships watched in amazement as 50 small human vessels accomplished what 10,000 advanced warships could not. The Void Hunter fleet that had seemed invincible just minutes before was now in full retreat, their ships fleeing from an enemy that fought like no one they had ever encountered. "How did you know this would work?" Commander Zaleth asked, his crystalline voice ringing with wonder and respect. Jake's answer was simple and delivered with quiet confidence. "Because sometimes the best strategy is to have no strategy at all." The Void Hunters spent decades studying how civilized species fight wars. They never considered that someone might choose to fight like barbarians instead. Queen Speaker Vrex clicked her approval as she watched the enemy fleet disappear into hyperspace. "Your species fights like the ancient swarms before we learned discipline and order. There is wisdom in remembering the old ways when the new ways fail." Admiral Kethvar shook his head in disbelief, but his voice carried grudging admiration. "Humans fight without honor, without discipline, without following any logical principles of warfare. It should not work against a superior enemy." "But it did work," Jake replied as he watched the last Void Hunter ship vanish from the sensors. "And that is all that matters. The Galactic Defense Council would never again underestimate the quiet human who said nothing during their meetings." They had learned that sometimes the most dangerous enemy was not the one with the biggest guns or the best armor, but the one who refused to fight by the established rules. Humanity had proven that chaos could defeat order, that madness could overcome logic, and that 50 small ships could accomplish what thousands of mighty dreadnoughts could not. The galaxy would remember this lesson for generations to come.